Hi, I'm B1 Louder, the sound engineer formerly known as Scott, and welcome to the Electricsexmachine. Yeah, I know, shut up and play the guitar already. But first, I'd like to address some criticisms aimed at both Matt and Chris at Texas Toast and myself during and after the Great Guitar Build-Off about the guitar dubbed the Hater Maker. Some of the less profane comments labelled it as ungiggable, a wall hanger, and a mere collector's item. Well, as Shakespeare said, there are more things in heaven and on earth than are dreamt of in your philosophy. Please allow me to explain why I think these comments are ill-informed. The earliest examples appeared circa 1690, crafted by renowned instrument maker Alexander Verboom, with the professional musician in mind for use in ensembles and orchestras. The harper lyre appeared in 1830. Although previously created in small numbers, by the 1890s double-necked instruments began to reflect modern tastes and trends, resulting in the proliferation of harp guitars. This 1916 example, with its 10-string harp, is believed to be the last built by Orville Gibson before his death in 1918. Hawaiian music was all the rage in the 1920s, and vaudeville performer Jack Pennywell, billed as the world's greatest guitarist, played a stellar double neck prior to commissioning Gibson to make their first double neck in 1932. His patented Twin Six weighed 7.5 pounds, had no frets, used only paint markers, and was tuned to open G and D, and was purely intended for slide usage. Here it is in an excerpt of Henhouse Blues. Post-World War II, the next advances came from Paul Bigsby. In 1948, he built his first solid-body electric, and shortly after, built a guitar for Nashville legend Grady Martin. Then, Mosrite founder Sammy Mosley, aided by Joe Maphis and his 9-year-old protege Larry Collins of the Collins Kids. These versatile early electric multi-necks offered octave and mandolin necks as options for the player. Collins would become a rockabilly icon and a lifelong devotee of the multi-neck guitar. In 1958, Gibson released the EMS 1235, followed by the EDS 1275 and the EBS 1250, a guitar fit for the king himself. Dan Electro followed suit, as did Gretsch. But the appeal of the multi-neck lay primarily with country players, such as young Ricky Nelson, Jimmy Bryant, Sherwin Linden, and Junior Brown, although they did attract the attention of surf guitarist Jimmy Luttrell. Blues legend Earl Hooker was an early adopter using an EDS 1275 exclusively. B.B. King joked about Lucille having a baby, and Bill Haley's guitarist Franny Beecher adopted the Stratosphere Twin too, as did psychedelic rock guitarist Johnny Eccles as he explored new boundaries. The 60s would see an explosion of makers and designs in the USA. But in Europe, US-built guitars were still a rarity, and European makers such as Egmond, Framus, Hofner and Vox filled the void. Even the Eastern Bloc countries joined in, as did the forgotten Southern Hemisphere in New Zealand and Australia. The 60s saw the emergence of the supergroups. Enter one Jimmy Page with his now familiar Gibson EDS 1275, and along with John Paul Jones, it's hard to imagine a Led Zeppelin show without a double neck or two. As it was with prog rockers Yes, with Steve Howe and Chris Squire and his wall bass, Emerson, Lake and Palmer's Greg Lake, and John Lodge of the Moody Blues. Then there was Mike Rutherford from Genesis and his ingenious collaboration with Shergold Guitars, which saw the birth of the modular double neck, which could morph back into a more conventional guitar when required. These were embraced by fellow early Genesis guitarist Steve Hackett and players such as Lee Pomeroy. An Eagles show without Hotel California and Don Felder or his latter-day replacement Stuart Smith using a double neck guitar is unthinkable. The Who's Pete Townshend had dispensed with his fragile Rickenbackers and was adamant he wouldn't get fooled again, and was happily windmilling on an EDS 1275 as well. The arrival of jazz fusion saw former Miles Davis sideman John McLaughlin wield his scalloped fretboard double necks for 2 hours at a time with the Mahavishnu Orchestra. His Eastern influence would lead to the genesis of the Shakti guitar, complete with drone strings which sat diagonally across the sound hole, and although not a multi-neck, it owed much to its design ethos, and it would inspire Pat Metheny's explorations and builds such as the Medusa and the Picasso guitar. Jan Ackerman embraced the hocus pocus of the double neck, as did Al Di Meola. Alex Lifeson and Geddy Lee from legendary Canadian band Rush both used double necks extensively. The 80s was the era of the guitar hero, and it would be shredded by the innovation and wizardry of Eddie Van Halen. Joe Satriani and Steve Vai also swept audiences away with the aid of 2 and 3 necks at a time, whilst Billy Sheehan and Randy Coven did likewise on bass. Whether you were 8 miles high, rode like the wind, had wings and could fly like an eagle, were looking out for love with your radar, whether you were a deadhead or a champion, whether you were God or merely God's guitarist. The drummer from Def Leppard may have only had 1 arm, but the guitar player had 2 necks. Ultimately, it was about rock and roll. From hard to heavy, glam to punk, and grunge to rage. Of course, there was dancing, from the Tennessee Waltz to the Last Waltz, and the extraordinary redneck jazz of Danny Gatton. From Bonamassa to Yngwie and all points between. Legendary players, guitar heroes, Hall of Famers, pop stars, and playlist favourites alike had a twin-neck guitar in their arsenal. It was about fun and showmanship too. I can't think of a cheap trick show without Rick Nielsen's 2, 3, 4, 5 and impossible 9-neck guitar antics. Guitarists had become the modern-day gunslinger, and multi-necks were wanted dead or alive. They were the ideal family guitar, perfect for audience participation as well, and a chance for a Kodak moment, though some were afraid to admit to it publicly. Women who rocked them with heart and soul. Heavy metal guitarists detuned and wielded them. With too much metal for one hand, they embraced the multi-headed beast in ritual sacrificial offerings before their devoted followers in stadiums and fields everywhere. Session legends loved them. From jazz to the experimental, no matter what kind of hat you wore. It was slash and burn with passion, shred and technique. From Tapper's Balawan, Felix Martin and Gordon Giltrap, and Bumblefoot and the ambidextrously confronting Michael Antonio Batio. We saw the return to the romanticism of the classical and the instrument's origins itself, and then a glimpse of its future with the vision of the extraordinary Michael Hedges. The song had remained the same, but had improved with age. At first glance, the multi-necked instrument is always seen as a novelty. After all, it's far from conventional in appearance. But versatility is its key, as was its original intention. Particularly since the advent of multi-track recording, layers, and complex multiple parts, there is no other way to render these performances to an audience live than to use a multi-neck to recreate them. No longer shall the multi-neck guitar be the butt of jokes. I've documented over 200 eminent players, some represented here, who dared to use one. It survived the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune for 3 centuries. Maybe it's time for one in your collection. If you made it to the end, thanks for watching. Please click like and subscribe. I've created a playlist primer as an accompaniment, which will allow those interested to visit the earlier and more obscure members of the family tree. Please feel free to drop me a line, leave a comment, and I'll see you for more multi-neck madness next episode.